All systems go. Cleared for takeoff.
What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, a.k.a. ToeTagginTambo. We're back on the SHIPIT Nation station, a new station that is. I know everyone was wondering what's going on. Well, we got the new channel for you. So I am going to ask you today, on your way in, please do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We're going to build it up. That's okay. We'll take our time with it. Hit the like button on the way in. It helps us out a ton. Back with my guy, Nades. We had some good calls yesterday. We had a lot of members. Ship. We had a guy turn $6. Jeremy turned $6 into $1,500. Won the $5 single entry. We had a bunch of other members. Bengland, B. England. He went second in one of the tournaments. Luke Diesel shipped one for $250. So a lot of members have joined SHIPITNation.com. You can still get in for $59 a month. That ends on June 12th. And it's, you're getting PGA, MLB. Yes, for now. But we have NFL, NBA, NHL, projections, tools for all of those. And then on top of it, we're looking to add more. So anything else we bring in will be included. The only thing extra is the optimizer. We've been transparent about it from the beginning, trying to let you guys know that. But for now, Nades, bring you in, man. We had an interesting slate yesterday. Some great pitcher calls. B-Lock over Bello. A lot of people there. I said the Reds wouldn't probably break the slate. They actually ended up hitting a grand slam and putting up the runs. But I just, it was good to move off move off Bello, go over to B-Lock. We had Senga at the top of our pitcher rankings. And this morning, you guys did the show already. You're back for round two. Barria will bury you if you don't have him. 1%, top of our pitcher rankings again. He's crushing right now on the early morning slate. What's going on, Nate? How you doing today?
Yeah, man, we're doing good. I feel like we nailed that slate last night. Obviously, the Braves. I was ready to chuck my remote at the TV because I had the nut pitcher combo. Had the not two-man stack with Andrew Vaughn, who I did give out, obviously, for the Dong call. But, hey, a Dong is 14 points. We'll take the 23 DraftKings points that he got at his salary any day of the week. Didn't hit the home run, so we lost there, or I missed there. But I'll take his points he got. Jake Berger, tasty little mini stack. And then I think my five-man Brave stack scored about 6 points, something like that, which was very hurtful. Obviously, that's baseball. That's why we play baseball, right? That's why we come back today and already pick some winners for the early slate. Went to the links, hit a little round of 9 holes quick, and we're back to pick more winners here for the night slate. And looking to run it back. Our tools over here at SHIPITNation.com have been absolutely incredible. I know members are shipping left and right. I know. We're on a track here, Tambo, to get more winners, and it seems like a fun little slate here tonight.
And it's what we tried to explain too from the start. Like, this is the whole point. These are tools, things that you can actually use. It's not just reliant on did Hoops core hit, did Nades get the job done today. We're going to give you guys the best game theory, angles, process, anything roster construction that we can possibly do to get you guys set up for success. But really, when you start digging into the tools, that was the process yesterday. I broke it down perfectly. I said everyone's on Bello. Our rankings like B-Lock, my thoughts are to go to him. It's just a reason to get off Bello. And then if you trust Senga, that was like a perfect combo up top, got you all the Dodgers you wanted, had a profitable day, did not find the ultimate winner's circle for myself, but just going through it was still a really good day, and I want to do it again tonight. So we'll talk through it. We do have a different setup here today, Nades, because real quick, we're going to go weather, pitchers, slate, like always. 6 games on DraftKings. 7 games and starts about a half hour earlier, right, over on FanDuel. So we'll still have lots of time after we get off this show to get into the FanDuel stuff. But for you guys out there, they're trying to get your lineups in, and you'll still have plenty of time. But we are going to break down that San Diego-Miami game before we get to the other one. So, Nades, start us off here, man. Grand scheme overview. What do you see for this slate? Any weather that you're looking at? Any stuff with the ballpark factors, things like that? Anything that you can see out there that you see?
Yeah, no, from a weather perspective, I think it's a pretty clean weather slate here. We might have possibly had a little bit of weather this morning slate, but that doesn't apply to here. So weather, from a weather perspective, looks pretty good to me, pretty hot across the board in terms of looking through here. And The only thing I do see is obviously we saw Toronto and Milwaukee kind of pop off a little last night. The roof is going to be closed there, so a small downgrade a little bit. Obviously, these guys can still hit the ball, but we're going to talk on one pitcher for a matter of fact, for sure. I know that's popping a little bit on our stuff. Obviously, over here making his second start in that ballpark, but overall, obviously we don't. It's a pretty equal slate from weather perspective and ballpark. A lot of people are probably going to run to the Boston to Fenway because obviously Fenway is a very good hitter's park. Boston seems to be the chalk of the slate for sure right now, followed closely by Toronto. So we'll talk on it, but overall, nothing alarming off the top, and should be a fun little slate here.
Yeah, just trying to get into it here now. I see people are just joining us late, so if you guys are just getting in here, do us a favor on the way in. Hit that subscribe button. We are starting it off fresh. Cody asked it. I got no problem addressing it. The other channel, we mentioned it in our Discord yesterday, people asking out there. Chris Randone is no longer with SHIPIT Nation, chose to go in a different direction, take some personal time, move on. Wish him nothing but the best. The channel actually was his, so we started with it. He was the owner of it. It had subscribers on it already. We started fresh from here. We're going to go from ground zero. We've got no problem with that. We know that people that are watching will watch whatever channel we're on. We appreciate that support. We'll try and grow it from there, and this is fun. We're going to have some contests along the way with some milestones. I think, Nades, you mentioned earlier today when we did the previous show, when we get to 1,000 subscribers, we'll do something special. When we get to 2,500, 5,000, and grow it up from there, I've got no worries about that. So happy to get you guys in here. Appreciate everybody that's watching right now. If you watch this later and you just catch this after the fact, by all means, just hit that subscribe button. It'll get you the notifications set up for when our shows go free. Almost all of our shows are free. We have one premium golf show. It's Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern. Just recorded it with Hoop and myself. And some weeks we're even doing that for free. And then on top of that, we have one for NFL. It'll be on Saturdays, tournament style show. We'll bring some cash games, some roster construction, stuff like that into it. But just in general, want to keep it fresh with you guys so you know what's going on here. Nades, let's talk about these pitchers, man. We'll talk about pitchers first because do you care about any of the San Diego, Miami pitchers for the FanDuel slate? If not, we can just move into the DraftKings slate, and then we will go back to that game for hitters when we get there.
Yeah, no, that game for me looks like hitters on one side of the board. Their implied team totals for both teams are pretty low. Blake Snell, I'm never a Blake Snell guy, especially against a Marlins team that K rate under 20%, under 19%. And then on the flip side, Padres hit left-handed pitching pretty well on the road, so no pitchers there. So I think we can jump right into the DraftKings main slate now in terms of pitchers.
Pitchers, yeah.
So let me 1 second. Let me go all the way up. So we're gonna start like at the
just
top.
Cut it in half. Let's just go like let's go Varland up, and then we'll do Weaver down. Let's just talk about the guys at the top first off. Who's getting the ownership? Who's getting your ownership? Exposure, I should say. And what do you like about some of these spots? And then ways that we can maybe go against some of these things if we want to. Bring up the pitcher rankings too if you want.
Yeah, so
you don't have to bring it on the screen. Sorry, I'm saying if you want to look off those and let the people know. I mean, it's by all means we can give this out today and just talk through it because these have been on fire right now for the last few days.
Yeah, I don't have the screen share ready, so we'll be screen sharing more going forward. Obviously, we like to show off our tools here. And personally, I know myself, Tambo is not a MLB tout, if you will, but the dude's very profitable at MLB, and he uses the same tools all of us coordinators or staff members over here at SHIPIT Nation use, and they've been fantastic. So that's exactly what I'm looking at. Obviously, we have all the metrics and data that you need possible, StatCast, ballpark factors, everything weighted into these things. And I mean, if you just followed them yesterday, it was pretty hard to miss. If you played the Dodgers and you played our top two guys, you printed money. And that's what we saw in the Discord with all the screenshots. Even McClanahan was ranked fourth, I think, on the rankings. And yeah, he didn't post the score that was needed at his salary, but if you had McClanahan and you had my Bello pivot there that was in my core plays over here, you had a pretty good day, especially if you played the Dodgers. So it was a pretty good night for me overall. But tonight is a new slate, obviously, looking into that. In terms of, I'll just kind of start at the bottom of this range. Louis Varland, I have no interest really in Louis Varland there. This Houston lineup can be attacked with pitchers to an extent here, but I just don't have any interest here. Houston has a pretty healthy implied team total. Louis Varland, very, very high barrel rate at 13%. So I actually do have some interest in the Astros bats a little bit here. Pretty high expected ERA. So I can't get to him at 8,300 there on DraftKings. Going up a little bit, James Paxton at 8,500. I actually have a decent amount of interest in James Paxton. I'm a believer in Paxton. I've played him quite a bit already. He's made my core over here quite a bit on SHIPIT Nation. The only issue I'm looking at is a lot of this Reds lineup. Obviously, they scored quite a bit of runs last night, and it's a very good hitter's park. So he's kind of a little bit lower down the road, down the list for me, but I do have interest in him. I mean, he's got a 32% K rate on the year, and you got Jonathan India, Stevenson, Fairchild, and Barrero down there in the 8-hole for the Reds. All have K rates approaching 30% or higher. So I do think Paxton can navigate here and post a reasonable score, especially at his price tag at 8,500 there. Not seeing him getting a ton of ownership. He's coming in right around 20 to 25% probably. I do have interest in next range that I think is a decent little pivot off of Paxton there based on what I'm seeing in terms of ownership that we'll talk about. Going up the board a little bit here. Aaron Nola against the Mets. We just saw Senga just absolutely deal last night, and we talked about it right here, Tambo. We talked about, I personally said I can't do it playing two teams, but I said he's got the upside to break the slate, and well, he did break the slate because the K upside was there. I said if he gets the walks under control, where he had one walk yesterday, I said he's going to post a big number, and our guy Keith Hall, Boomer's daddy, had him in his FanDuel core over here on the website. Number one ranked pitcher for us on our starting pitcher ranks, and Senga posted a gem. So that was a fantastic call. I know we talked about him quite a bit on the show. Aaron Nola here against these Mets, 23% K rate for the Mets against right-handed pitching. Nola's got about a 22% K rate, pretty low barrel rate. Expected ERA numbers are good. He's going to pitch probably 6-7 innings here if he's dealing well. I think you can go to Nola a little bit here. I don't mind it. The only bat I'm really scared of here is Pete Alonso and Brett Beatty on the other side. I just don't know. I haven't built teams yet. I'm quite frankly just diving through the slate here as it kind of breaking it down with all of you is what I kind of like to do. I don't like to create a lot of biases and stuff before I jump on these shows. I know sometimes that's how you roll too here, Tambo. So I think Nola makes some sense. I don't know if I can get there at the 9,100 price tag because I do have a lock here for me on the slate. I'm going Hunter Brown. Hunter Brown will be on every one of my teams. I talked about it last night with B-Lock. I'm not afraid of this Minnesota team. B-Lock mowed down this team yesterday, and I think Hunter Brown's an even better pitcher for sure. He's proven a better pitcher. K rate 28%, barrel rate under 9, expected ERA numbers at 3.8, and this Twins team has a K rate of 28% on the road against right-handed pitching. Hunter Brown, I don't care what the ownership is. He's going to make every one of my teams. I'm just clicking the lock button on him. He'll probably be 40 to 50% owned. I don't really care, to be honest with you. And then the next guy that's going to get a ton of ownership up here is George Kirby against these Yankees. We just saw the Yankees absolutely launch last night. I mean, they were hitting bombs left and right. It looked like it was Coors Field out there. And I don't know if I can get to Kirby here, to be honest with you. Kirby I don't think he has a strikeout upside, especially at 9,400. I think I would rather go down to Paxton. I would rather save a little bit, go down to some of these cheaper guys than play George Kirby, especially at his expected ownership. I mean, I'm seeing 33 to 35% ownership roughly. Obviously, that's going to change in things a little bit here, but he's going to be 30+% owned. I'm going to fade George Kirby here against the Yankees. The Yankees are starting to hit the ball, and I mean, you got Aaron Judge sitting at a 640 expected ISO on the road this year against right-handed pitching. So that's enough for me to go off that. So my ranks in this range, Hunter Brown's a lock button here for me. And then I would probably go James Paxton, number 2, and then a distant third would be Aaron Nola for me.
Yeah, you said quite a bit there, so I think I don't need to elaborate too much, but I will say that, like, this is a different day for me. When I go and look at the stuff, yesterday we could pinpoint it all out. We'll find some more of it later, but when you go to the pitcher rankings and look at, like, some of the guys that you could go up against, and sorry, if I go to the stack rankings, I should say this is where I usually look for this, but all the chalk going up against the Mets, the Mariners, the Yankees, the Twins, like all these guys that have the ownership that's showing up, they also project very poorly in our stack projections, in our overall projections, all of that. So for me, it makes it like you said, where it's just like, all right, Hunter Brown it is. Let's go with it. Whatever happens. I understand people playing a bunch of teams that are going to want to stack Minnesota against them just because the setup where when you know someone's going to be that owned or you know that many people are on them, usually large field or higher dollar, smaller field where you know you're going to be one of the only teams in that spot. But there's just other ways that you can get different. And I was just trying to see some of the ownership here right now, looking at it, George Kirby, 30-ish%, Hunter Brown almost 50, but we know the chalk is always better with these pitchers, in most cases at least. And in this case, everything I'm seeing on our metrics, our stats, our tools and projections, it's Hunter Brown, and that's fine. You'll have to get different elsewhere. We'll talk about that when we get to the bats. But what I'm saying is, with all this, the Twins, the Yankees, the Reds, the Mets, and the Mariners, I go back and look at our other stuff, Nades, like what we were doing yesterday to try and find these balances. The Reds, I guess, if you had to pick one here, it looks like it would be the Reds against Paxton. But again, what are we getting out of that? What are we chasing from yesterday? I just don't see that being much. So for me, I'm sticking with the guys we talked about. You mentioned him up top. If anything, that maybe is a reason if you wanted to be off Paxton some. He's down a little bit in our projections. The Reds are a little bit up in our stack rankings, but then it still forces you into like a 30% Kirby or building differently. And that's what I really do want to talk about here, Nades, because I think when we get to the bats, there is some big bats that we can play. Again, even if it gets us different, because not everyone's going that route. If everyone's going Brown, Kirby, maybe, or something along those lines, one of Nola or Paxton or whatever it might be, if we go just Brown and then commit to some of these guys down below as we're about to go, maybe that's the way that we can get different here. And then that just gives us more money to spend on bats where others will be punting. There is great spots to punt to, but we'll be able to still find bats that gets us a little bit of a different construction. What's your thoughts on that? And then use that to segue into this Weaver down to, I think it's Lamet is down there at the bottom. So you can check for some of the other guys that you want to talk about. Henry, and the chat wants to talk about Manoah. Go through this bottom range as well.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I'd rather eat the chalk at pitcher, and I'm already kind of getting fading one of the chalk pitchers in George Kirby against the Yankees here. So I don't really care about Hunter Brown's ownership. There's so many ways to get different. We talked about it just yesterday, right? If you stack the Braves up and you fade the top three guys in Acuna, Olsen, and Sean Murphy, and obviously, I mean, the guys that did do damage were the bottom of the order guys yesterday for the Braves. Kevin Pillar, Michael Harris, some of those guys. That's just a quick way. I mean, you go in there and you play Hunter Brown. If you go in there and you play Hunter Brown and you five stack Boston 1 through 5, right? Well, your team's the same as everyone else's. So there's different ways to get different. I look at total ownership of, and it's more, Tambo, you talk about this all the time, right? It's not about who you play, it's how you play them. That applies a ton to MLB DFS, right? There's 9 guys on every team in the roster. And we just talked about it this morning. Guys don't like playing the bottom of the order. People don't like playing the bottom of the order guys in teams, right? Like Emmanuel Valdez down there hitting in the 8th hole. I think he's an incredible play. He'll be under-owned because he's hitting the 8 spot, right? Everybody looks like that. And, he might get gypped of 1 at-bat, right? Whereas Verdugo might get 4 at-bats and Valdez only gets 3, right? Well, if Valdez hits a bomb and steals a base or something in his first 3 at-bats, I mean, he's fine, right? So there's little things like that. I just don't pay too much attention to that, especially when I'm already making a fade. Like George Kirby, he's going to see 30-ish% ownership. I think there's just enough ways to get different that way in terms of roster construction. Going down the board a little bit here, one guy that's standing out to me on the starting pitcher rankings, it was the same kind of situation this morning. Jamie Barria, everyone was talking about the White Sox, Hoop included, for good reasons. I did think the White Sox made some sense, right? It was hot in Chicago. White Sox have some power, but I mean, these pitcher rankings that we have over here on SHIPIT Nation have been on fire. And one guy's staring me in the face right here, Julio Teheran against Toronto. It does definitely increase my interest in him too. That I just got the alert that they're closing the roof there as well. So obviously the roof was open last night. The ball was flying. We saw 6 runs, I think, in the first couple innings. Blue Jays started scoring runs in the very first inning. The Brewers got to who pitched yesterday for Toronto that had Kikuchi. right? Kikuchi had a decent amount of ownership, and the Brewers got to him right away. William Contreras hits a bomb. Brian Anderson, some of those guys did all right too. But the roof is closed here. I think Julio Teheran, obviously this is his second start. I recall his first start, he went 5 innings, had a 25% K rate, barrel rate, under league average, and he's 7,400. The only thing that scares me is the Blue Jays don't strike out a ton, but there's a lot of teams like that. It's a 7-game slate, and there's a lot of teams. You're just trying to survive, right, at SP2 here, I think, because pretty much everyone's team is going to come preloaded with Hunter Brown. So you just need to figure out where you're going for SP2. I think Julio Teheran kind of falls in that same bucket this morning as Jamie Barria, who, if you look at the scores, if you don't have him on the early slate, Tambo, you said it, he's burying your lineup. And he posted, 17 or 18 DraftKings points at his salary. He's got the win coming as well because I think they're up 10-1. Yeah. And he falls in that same category here. Teheran does for me. So I think he makes a ton of sense. Not going to have any ownership because everyone, I mean, the Blue Jays have an implied team total over 5.5. And everyone looks at that. Blue Jays are favored. They look at the team totals and automatically right away they hit the X button on Julio Teheran. So I would definitely caution you there. I do have some interest in him. And the second guy for me down here is going to be Clark Schmidt. This is a matchup play for me here. I'm not seeing a ton of ownership on him either. Pretty low game total overall. I mean, implied team total for the Mariners sitting at 4.1. Clark Schmidt, 25% K rate on the season. He does allow a decent amount of hard contact, has about 11% barrel rate so far. But, I mean, he's on the opposite side of that Kirby chalk. Why can't it be Clark Schmidt, right? Why can't it be Clark Schmidt in the same exact environment, the same exact conditions? Everyone's going to Kirby. Why can't you just flip the build, right? Go to Clark Schmidt for a significant discount, almost $2,000 cheaper in the exact same game, and save the salary and the ownership. I think it's a very good play there. Clark Schmidt, 7,700. I think the K upside's there. This Mariners team that's projected, or this roster that's projected, has a 28% K rate to right-handed pitchers at home so far. Expected ISO of just 153. I think he's got incredible upside here. And I'm not seeing the ownership going there. And it's kind of a little double leverage, right, Tambo? It flips the build. Everyone's going Hunter Brown and George Kirby and mixing some of James Paxton and some of these other guys. I think you just flip the build right there. So for me, I mean, my pitcher pool is pretty tight. One guy I do want to hit on here, I already saw some stuff going on in the chat in terms of one guy in particular, and he's all the way down the board. 5,700. It's no different than the guy we talked about yesterday, Mr. Ranger Suarez, right? Everyone said, oh my God, you're crazy. Why are you talking about Ranger Suarez on an MLB 13-game slate? Well, what did Suarez post up there? For his fifth, I think it was 5,200. He scored 15 DraftKings points right around
14 or 15. Yeah, it was solid.
Yeah. So what did that do? That allowed you to play Senga if you wanted. It allowed you to play every single bat on the slate. Obviously, if you played the Braves, you didn't get there. But if you played those expensive Dodgers, you played some other guys, you probably had a pretty good night playing Mr. him there. So I think this is the same kind of play. And I look at this Rockies team, and man, this is brutal. 37% K rate to left-handed pitching on the road this season. This projected lineup that my guy Keith's Rockies are about to roll out here. I mean, you got Brenton Doyle striking 12 at-bats. He's striking out at a 58% clip. You got Montero striking out at a 70% clip. 7 out of his 10 at-bats he K'd to left-handed pitching so far on the road this season. I mean, if Tommy Henry navigates through Profar, Grichuk, Diaz, and Chris Bryant, I mean, I'll tell you 5 through 9, there's a lot of Ks there. The only issue is Tommy Henry, not a huge K upside, but what did we just see yesterday with Mikolas against the Kansas City Royals? I talked about it right here on the show. I said, look, at Mikolas isn't a huge strikeout guy, but the Royals, they strike out against right-handed pitching at a 34% clip. This is the exact same spot as yesterday. Nobody's going to go to Tommy Henry there at 5,700. I haven't built teams, but I can guarantee you can probably build a pretty solid team with hitters if you go Hunter Brown and you go Tommy Henry there. middle's the ownership, and you can play any bats you want, and it doesn't really matter about ownership because nobody's going to play Tommy Henry. So he is interesting for me, but in this range, I'm going to have to side with Clark Schmidt, number one, Julio Teheran, and then I'm going all the way down to the bottom to Tommy Henry for me.
Yeah, I don't hate it. What did I see in the chat here just a second ago? He said, gosh, where did it go? Said I can't do. Oh yeah. Oh my Godfather had I can't play Julio. This is what everyone said about Senga yesterday. I can't do Senga. I'm not saying it's the best play, but I'm just saying we've been trusting these things lately, and it's been pretty solid. So I'm definitely much heavier on the Hunter Brown. I'm gonna play a little bit of Julio just because when you look at it, here's the thing too. I'll explain something else because sometimes people want to know this stuff. But like when you go to our stack rankings, they're projections based. The Blue Jays project well in our projections. So if we're trusting the projections, that's the case. But when we're looking to flip the build a little bit, or you're looking for some unique stuff in tournaments and in single entry and in things like that, the pitcher rankings are stats based. Again, we have full tutorials on the site. We have a full tutorial that Hoop, myself, and Boomer did to start things off on day 2 after launch, where you can check this out there as well. But what we're saying is obviously when you play a Julio lineup, you're not playing the Jays. So it doesn't matter if they project well. You're not stacking 5 Jays or 3 Jays or something up against your pitcher. So the whole point is when you see that projections-based versus stats-based, it's pretty obvious. If you roll Julio out, just roll a different stack than the Jays. But when I look for the mismatches, and like I said, right now, the only one I can see is the Reds are like the 5th or 6th best in our stack rankings. And then obviously Paxton is getting love. So if you wanted to go against that spot, I think that's what it was that I was looking at. Yeah, Paxton, I think the Reds would be interesting for that. Again, now we go to a smaller slate. They don't need maybe the Grand Slam to make it happen at their prices and stuff. Not that I love them. We'll go to bats here in a minute, but just saying in general, that's where I'm looking for discrepancies. This is one where it is scary because it's Julio. I think I like the other guys better that you mentioned. And the only thing I would say, Nades, I don't know your thoughts on this. Again, ownership is usually pretty solid. We're working on some owner projections ourselves. But is there any chance you could see where Kirby comes in much lower owned than what people think because they get scared off by that Yankees output yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, I could. I think it's just the nature of the pitching slate. George Kirby has a good name recognition. We played him a ton last year, obviously a complete stud, but he's been a different pitcher this year. His strikeouts are not there. He's got a 20% strikeout rate. So to be honest, the nature of the pitcher slate here, I mean, we just saw it with Lance Lynn on the early slate. I mean, he was projected to be one of the chalkiest pitchers, and he came in that way. It was just the nature of the pitcher slate, and people are going to have money to spend because you don't have the Dodgers, you don't have the Braves, you don't have Texas, you don't have these big teams that have $5,000 hitters 1 through 9, right? So I think he's going to get the ownership. They're going to look at he goes long. He's got good expected ERA numbers. He's got a very low barrel rate. So they think, okay, the Yankees fluke last night, and they're going to come right back with Kirby. So I do think he does come in at least 25% plus ownership here, and I'm just okay going away from that.
It's definitely a product of that. You said too. We're going to go to the bats here in a second, but just to say it, that was why I brought it up, because there is something about that, right? Where sometimes people see last night, like Judge Dong, the Yankees, all kinds of stuff went on, and the people are like, oh, I'm not going to go back to that now. It sometimes happens, but we'll see. Not too worried again. Like Eric, our guy, EJ, he's always in the chat. Great dude. Tommy Henry, almost 10%. Who cares? 90% of the field's not playing him. Again, you're not going crazy with this guy. This isn't the Hunter Brown conversation. This is take a shot on Tommy Henry if you want at the bottom. We're just saying why. He does pop. It's definitely the guy I have the least faith in based on everything else and looking at it. But in general, when, like you said, Nades, it sets up, I think it's Hunter Brown and then start fitting guys in around him. When it's Tommy Henry and Clark Schmidt and these guys that are showing up, makes it a little bit tougher to trust. But at the same time, I just roll them out and then take some shots. It looks like Hunter Brown and mix around it. That's how I see it. Anything else you want to add with these pitchers? If not, we can move on to that first game quick and then move on to the 6-game DraftKings slate.
Yeah, the only thing with Henry, too, is, again, I haven't built teams, and there's not a ton of high-powered, expensive offenses on this slate, personally, that I'm seeing outside. I mean, the Red Sox, who are the chalk of the slate, do have some expensive pieces. So the thing with Henry is I think it's just going to give you a different – if you play Henry, I don't know if you're you're going to be able to spend your salary, and not that you need to spend your salary, but what happens then, Tambo, is people that go Hunter Brown, Tommy Henry, right? They start falling in the exact same roster construction that everyone else is, because they have all this money to spend, right? There's only so many expensive guys on the slate. So that would be my one caution, just because people like to spend money, right? If they can upgrade a guy like, let me give an example. If they can go from like a guy like Willie Castro, right, on the Twins, not saying we're playing the Twins, but if they could go from like a guy from Willie Castro and go up to like, I don't know, Buxton or something, right? Instead of leaving $2,000 on the table, they're going to do that, right? And playing Tommy Henry gives you the ability to do that. So I'm not saying you need it on this slate, just because you're going to have salary on this, just looking through the prices on a lot of these hitters. So I don't know if you actually need to go all the way down to his price tag. I was just making the case that, hey, this is a matchup based play, and that's why you're seeing 10%-ish ownership on him, because people look at this K rate on this Colorado roster that's supposed to get rolled out here tonight, and I mean 37% K rate. I would throw Tambo out there on the hill against a team that's striking out at a 30% clip, especially at that price tag. So that is one thing to keep in consideration. If you do play Tommy Henry, don't go away from your correlation in your teams and just start upgrading all your bats and spend your salary, because that's what everyone else is going to do too.
Yeah, and just a note, like again, Eric in the chat said, I love the Brewers today. Stacking versus Manoah has been very profitable. This is actually one that stands out a little bit to me. We'll see when we get there, but Manoah way down our board, and that's fine. It's not like he's getting a bunch of ownership or something like that. I see Manoah right now somewhere around, what do you see, 15% or so, Nades, give or take?
Manoah, yeah, I'm seeing like I'm actually seeing like 15 to 20, to be honest with you.
Right, and then I was just going to say, if you go to our stack rankings, and we're getting into bats anyway now, so we could start there, is the Brewers middle of the pack. But when you look at the difference between like the Blue Jays up there and the Brewers, it's not that crazy to think. And again, then you'll have a price factor and everything built into it. So when we get there, we'll definitely talk about it. A lot of the guys, like that lineup's confirmed pretty cheap. So there's definitely some opportunity here, even if it's a mini stack. I think that's a way you could definitely go. Let's move on. Let's talk about this San Diego-Miami game quick. It is included. The FanDuel slate, as we mentioned, is a 7-game slate. Anything you're seeing here for bats on either side that you've got interest in?
Yeah, if I was playing the FanDuel, I obviously don't play a ton on FanDuel in MLB or any sport really outside of NBA and NFL, just because they put out a pretty decent product for that. But Jorge Soler would be a core play for me. The dude is a left-handed pitching masher. I'm not afraid of Blake Snell. He's allowing over a 12% barrel rate. So I actually have more interest in the Marlins here. It's just a bet on Blake Snell not being good. I don't like Blake Snell at all. And I would go to some of these Marlins, especially that 1-2 stack there. De La Cruz at 2,800 on FanDuel is super cheap. I think that's a great price tag there. Batting leadoff, pretty low K rate, expected ISO over 260. So that 1-2 stack there for the Marlins, I think makes a lot of sense. And then on the flip side, the Padres, Brandon Dixon, maybe 2,200 there, first base, outfield eligible. Nice little value play. Trent Grisham hits lefty pretty good actually, but Braxton Garrett's good enough where I'm not interested to play these Padres on this slate, even on FanDuel. But that 1-2 there for the Marlins stands out quite a bit.
Yeah, Cruz, Grisham, Dixon, all kind of pop at the bottom of that order a little bit in our hitter rankings, but for sure Soler, he's the guy. And if you wanted, like you said, to make it the 1-2, pretty, unique over on FanDuel. I've seen a lot lately where, at least in the higher dollar, smaller field stuff, people are doing the 4-2-2s. And that's just an example where you could do it. Not many people are even going to touch that game at all. You plug those two in there, De La Cruz is 2,800 on FanDuel. Soler's 3,800. Still have plenty of money left to build out. And again, there's only 6 other games to consider once you're off that game. So you don't have to use 3 guys. Just use those 2 and move it along. And I think that would be fine. And those 2 are definitely the ones that would stand out. On the other side, like you said, Dixon, 3 guys, Dixon, Cruz, and Grissom all stood out. But at the same time, do you really need to go there? Like you said, I'm not as sure. So I'm kind of leaning the 2-man stack you talked about on the Marlins side. Let's go to this DraftKings slate. Let's start with this first game. We got Milwaukee versus Toronto. We just talked about Manoah stacking up against them. So it's a good segue into it, Nades. What are we doing here with this game? Like I said, the Jays do pop in our stack rankings. The Brewers a little bit further down the board, but the delta is not insane between the two where it's like you can't go the other way. And Manoah being way down our board does kind of make it a little bit interesting from that side or that perspective.
Yeah, Manoah is way down everyone's board. I'll just be quite frank, honest with everyone. He has not been good. The Brewers team by any means is no incredible offense, but this is just a bet on Manoah not being right now. Guaranteed ninth inning at bat for the Brewers, but overall, I mean, for individual bats, Yelich, Tellez, and William Contreras, I don't mind that 3-man there, but outside of that, I mean, a 5-man would just be a bet on, hey, Manoah, not been good right now. Teams have been just crushing this guy. Brewers hit the ball around a little bit last night. They're starting to hit the ball a little bit, but personally for me, I don't know if I can do a 5-man Brewers stack, but I do like that 1, 3, 4 right there at the top in Yelich, Tellez, and William Contreras. Obviously, William went long last night. He's still got a nice price tag on both sites, but especially on DraftKings, 3,700 there at the catcher position. I like that. Yelich has been good all season, and he's starting to hit more bombs. So I do like that. 4,400 there at the outfield, I think makes a lot of sense. Obviously, you can throw in guys like Owen Miller, batting 2, 3,100, nice value tag there. Brian Anderson didn't do it for us last night, but batting 5th, 3K makes a lot of sense there. Bryce Terang, the dude can steal any base. He can literally hit a chopper to third base and beat it out at first. He's that fast. I think he makes some sense. So overall, Brewers 5-man stack would just be a bet on Manoah not being great, and nobody's really playing these Brewers, and they do have a 4.5 implied run total here. On the flip side, on the Blue Jays side, we talked on Tehran. I'm seeing the Blue Jays as a top stack across the industry, and it's for good reasons, right? They have a 5.5 implied run total. Vegas thinks they're going to get to Tehran here, but everyone said the same thing that our guy earlier in the chat said, I can't do Tehran. Well, everyone said that same thing against San Francisco. He went out there, posted 16 DraftKings points, which was fine, especially, I mean, if you're telling me he's getting 16 DraftKings points again tonight at 7,400, I would click the lock button at him. I just would. You're giving me a guaranteed 16 points, 7,400 at the SP2 spot on this slate. I would click the lock. So I would caution you with the Blue Jays, especially at the ownership that they're getting. They're going to be probably contest Boston, to be honest with you, for the highest owned team on the slate overall. I just have a lot more interest in the Red Sox. The only individual bat I love for the Blue Jays is Matt Chapman. I talked about this guy quite a bit. It seems like I talk about him every time he's on the slate, but the dude is just on a tear this year, and I believe in hot streaks in baseball. So I'll continue to ride hot streaks in baseball. I like Matt Chapman quite a bit. He is 4,600, so you do pay for him, but I do think you have salary to work with here tonight, so I don't hate Matt Chapman. And I actually have a little bit more interest in the Brewer side just for the leverage, for the ownership, guaranteed ninth inning at bats, and that's where I'm at here.
Yeah, you took mine. Of the one thing I was going to say about the Blue Jays is the Chapman one, because he's popping in our hitter rankings. You look at ownership on other sites that have it up, and he doesn't look like it's that much. So like you said last night, like we always talk about, if you don't want to play a chalky one-off in most cases, this would be a spot, because the whole point is, for those that don't understand it or watching for the first time or trying to think from the mind of others how we're looking at it, is if this stack does go off, what's that one-off going to do for you? The stack went off and you're dead. So what? You have Chapman's home run. The rest of the stack goes off, you're already left behind. So you're looking at it as you don't believe in this stack. You're just trying to pick the one-off piece. You don't want the chalky version that would fit in with all the other stuff. So it kind of makes sense to just not play that unless you're doing that. So I do like it from that. And I know you talk about this all the time, Nades, like looking at our starting lineups, advanced data. We did this yesterday. We brought it up. People can look back at that, or we can talk about it more here. But just you look at XISO and things like that, they pop in the stack rankings because people have to have a projection on them. Obviously, the Jays are all sitting around 10. So when you're looking at a DraftKings stack ranking with the 5 best projected Blue Jays, it's around 50 plus based on that. That's where the numbers come from. Well, they're all going to be around that number. But when you then factor in price and our advanced ratings and stuff like that, they're not, the numbers aren't the best from the stats. And again, this sheet is based on lefty-righty splits, home road splits. Okay, is there a sample size? Well, look at this, Nades. 72 at-bats, 81 at-bats, 74, 66, 66, 57. This is a large sample size on what looks to be the second highest owned stack on the night. When you convert that over to FanDuel, add even more because FanDuel just gets the bump on total stack ownership in all cases. So yeah, there's ways to get different with the stack, but I'm saying this makes me think more of that Julio play being a potential at his price point where you go Brown, Julio, and then fit in something else. It doesn't mean, though, you have to jump to Boston because you're already different. That's if you like Boston. We're going to segue there in a second. But as you saw last night, we had the right pitchers. It didn't mean the Braves would still go off. People that went with the Dodgers and other stacks are the ones that found their way to the top. And that's the beauty of ShipItNation.com. We just hit the top of the hour, so I'm going to hit it up quickly. Lots of people last night used the pitcher rankings, used the Dodgers over the Braves. It was kind of like a choose your poison. We'll pick your poison, one or the other. And then what ended up happening is some found the Dodgers with a different stack than others were on. And I think it was with Romy Gonzalez and some of those Chicago White Sox that we talked about. That's the power of the tools and not just what does Hoops Core Report say or who is Nades on tonight. We're trying to guide you guys in the best direction possible, but we made it so you can set up your own process, ask the questions in Discord, find those stacks, and then be able to find it from there. And that is what happened last night, Nades. People found their way to it via the pitcher rankings. One of the two stacks that everybody loved. Maybe tonight it's the Red Sox over the Jays. We're just saying. But I definitely think that's something to look at here where if you go with Julio, it doesn't mean, you're off the Jays for sure, but I'm saying it doesn't mean you have to go then immediately pound in the Red Sox because you're different a pitcher. You can. That makes sense. But I'm saying you also can look at some of these other stacks. But let's segue, Nades. Let's go to this next one. Reds at Red Sox. We got the double Reds going here. What are we doing in this spot here? We've already talked about Paxton, talked about the Reds being a little bit up our stack rankings board, and then we know the Red Sox, to me at least, look like the absolute best stack on the board on paper, but how does that play out for you?
Yeah, on paper for me, I just look at the metrics, the StatCast data and everything. To me personally, for projection-wise in baseball, I'll hit on this just because obviously this is a big talking point. I truthfully believe we have the best projections over here. I've used these projections my entire DFS career, especially for other sports that you'll get over here. Again, $59 a month does get you access to everything, $5.99 for the year if you guys are not a member. But projections for me, for hitters, I don't really pay too much attention to be honest with you, because projections have a lot to do with implied Vegas run totals, over, under, park factor, things like that. What I love in baseball is the analytical StatCast data, the expected WOBA, expected ISO, K rate, how the splits, right? How hitters do against handedness, right? Keith talks about this in the Discord. We talk about this in the Discord constantly with our members. Some hitters are just better hitting at home, hitting with a different backdrop, hitting in this stadium, hitting in that stadium, right? And the StatCast data all shows that. Whereas a projection is just strictly tied a lot to over under in a game, implied run total that Vegas sets. And that's what drives projections a lot. So personally, I don't pay too much attention in baseball on the hitters in projection. I do think projection in pitchers for baseball is a little bit more projectable. Again, on the hitters, the Hall of Fame hitters fail 7 out of 10 times, right? So you're trying to project a sport where the best of the best fail 7 out of 10 times. It's just hard to do, right? Whereas pitchers is a little bit more projectable. You got what's their average pitch count, things like that. So that's where I pay more attention to projection overall is at the pitcher position. So for me, the Red Sox are light years ahead of Toronto here tonight on the StatCast data, the overall team roster that they have rolled out that's confirmed. This roster has a K rate under 19% against right-handed pitching. You combine that with Luke Weaver allowing a 13% barrel rate, which is the highest, I think, on this entire slate. And they get a hit in Fenway Park, the best park on this slate for hitting. I love the Red Sox here. No surprise. The Red Sox are going to be owned, but hey, people are going to pair the Red Sox and the Blue Jays together because guess what? You have money to spend. They're going to play Hunter Brown. They're going to pair those two together and kind of just build the same teams everyone else. I won't do that. I might play a one-off Matt Chapman there, but the only issue is my favorite Red Sox bat is Rafael Devers there at the same position, third base, batting second tonight, 6,100. But I love this lineup 1 through 9. I already talked about Emmanuel Valdez down there in the 8-hole. Connor Wong actually has some pretty good numbers too. 2,900 at the catcher position, bat 9th. He'll probably have no ownership there. So if you do like a 8-9 1-2-4 stack or something with Yoshida there in the 4-hole skip Justin Turner. That's one way to be unique, right? How many people are going to go 8-9, 1-2-4, right? Not too many. A lot of people are going to go in here 1-2-3-4-5, 1-2-3-4-6, something like that, right? Play the top of the order guys, and that's just a simple way to be different. But yeah, Red Sox top on the board. It's not even close for me when I look at the numbers compared to Toronto. On the flip side, the Reds, they get the same hitting conditions, right, that the Red Sox do, also guaranteed ninth inning at bats. And James Paxton is going to come in 20 to 30% owned probably, at least what I'm seeing. So I might need to look a little bit more into James Paxton here and possibly leverage a little bit with some of these Reds. Spencer Steer, Matt McLain. I mean, McLain's been a stud ever since he's came up. His price tag has gone up to $3,700, but I still think that's too cheap for his upside at the shortstop position, which is overall pretty a weak position as of late. I mean, shortstop on the early slate was a wasteland. It's been like that for a couple weeks now, personally, outside the guys way at the top, right, like Bobby Witt and things like that. But we don't have those guys on the slate here tonight. So I do think Matt McLain makes a lot of sense. Even Luke Maile down there in the 9-hole has very good numbers in a limited sample against left-handed pitching, but expected ISO approaching Aaron Judge numbers. 643, 11 plate appearances, 643 expected ISO, strikeout rate of just 8%. That's a little interesting there. A little 9-2-4 stack or something like that for the Reds, a little mini. They do have a 4.8 implied team total, and that just shows you Fenway Park is just been great for hitting all year. And it's a little leverage against James Paxton too. So I do like both sides of this game. Reds more of a mini stack for me, and I'll probably be pushing the chips in on Boston here tonight.
Yeah, I'm trying to build the winning lineup while we're at it here. I actually think there's a potential here for a game stack too. And this is one of the things I'll say is just, going back, like you said, it's 5 Red Sox or 4 Red Sox with a couple of the Reds and then fill it out, or you can go the 5-3 route or whatever you want to do, 4-4. It's all up to you. I think you laid it out perfectly for how I would look at it. Again, we're looking at the same data. If you want to look at that data, got to go to shipitnation.com, spend the $59 or get the annual, works it down to much cheaper on the monthly basis. I think it's like $45, but just breaking it down, we're seeing it. And when you look at this, Nades, what I'm thinking is if you put, again, people want to pair up the Red Sox and the Jays if they can, and then they have the cheap pitchers if they want to go to a guy that we talked about earlier. That's why, like when Eric said, if he's going to be 10%, I don't care that he's 10%, but I'm saying if people are making that work, that's how you get to a style build like this. If you plug that in with Julio, you're not putting the Jays in there. You got the Red Sox out. You don't have to go to the Red Sox. I'm just saying I think that's definitely a way that you could go. There is a couple more teams I've got interest in, but I think the way you laid that one out was pretty perfect. I'm going to keep messing around with that while you take us into this next one. Phillies, Mets. Let's talk about this game.
Yeah, looking at it here, the Phillies implied run total 4.6. Going against Mr. Cookie Carrasco, who I think is terrible. So I do have some interest here in the Phillies, and it would just be more of a stack for me. In terms of individual bats, Bryce Harper is making the lineup again tonight. Obviously, I should have hit on that. That was a little bit of a miss on my part too last night on the show. That did give a huge boost. Well, not a huge boost, but a pretty big boost to Senga when you don't have to face a guy like Bryce Harper in the heart of that lineup. It's just mental. It's his power, everything. You're just thinking when he's at the plate, right? Oh, I can't miss this. Or you're pitching around him, right? There's just a lot of things. So that did give a boost to Senga. I know our guy Boomer put that right in his note on his core report over here at SHIPIT Nation. No Bryce Harper in the lineup, just gave a boost to Senga, and he rolled with it. Personally, I was too chicken to do it, but if you did, a lot of members did because he was our top-ranked pitcher, and he got to the winner's circle. But Bryce Harper is back in the lineup tonight. I think he makes a lot of sense. Obviously, no surprise there. Bryce Harper obviously always has the threat to go over the wall. 5,800 there, lefty. And I'm not afraid of Cookie Carrasco by any means. Allowing 11% barrel rate, 13% K rate on the year, which is horrible. Expected ERA approaching 6. He's going to probably pitch 5 or 6 innings too. I think these Phillies can get to him. I really do. So I'm not seeing, pulling up the ownership here, I'm not seeing a ton of ownership. I mean, people are going to go to these Phillies, but again, ownership, I mean, we talked about it how many times. Ownership is just a kind of ambiguous number off the top, right? Because there's so many ways in stacking, in a stacking sport like baseball, to get different. It's not like NBA, right, where it's all projection driven. Everyone's playing the same dudes and projections drive ownership. In baseball, it's just kind of hearsay and industry talk and stuff that drives it up. So the Phillies have a lot of interest in them. One call out on the Mets side here. Pete Alonso has absolutely owned Aaron Nola in his career. So I think he's a very good one-off kind of play. Even a mini stack there with Alonso and Brett Beatty. Beatty has smashed right-handed pitching at home on the season. He's 3,200 there at third base. And a lot of people at third base are playing Rafael Devers. They're playing Matt Chapman. Hey, it's scary to leave those guys out. If you're stacking the Jays, you're stacking the Red Sox. But is it crazy to think Brett Beatty can go out there and hit a bomb and match those? I mean, it's baseball. At the end of the day, no, it's not crazy. So I do think those are my two main interests on the Mets. But I'm not stacking these Mets up against Nola. I already talked about Nola. I think Nola is a good enough pitcher. Maybe even if I don't play him on tonight's slate, I think he's good enough to not stack against him with these Mets. But the Phillies, I do have a lot of interest in for mini and 5-man stacks.
Yeah, I wouldn't have too much to add to this. I'm with you on that. I mean, just going back and forth, looking at some of the tools and stuff, breaking it down. Nola's up there a little bit, but obviously Alonso, I think, is the key. You mentioned him already. So he makes sense as the one-off there is what I would consider. And then Carrasco, I was just looking at it, is up the board a little bit. So it's really going back just to that previous game. Like Weaver was way down the board. We talked about playing Boston showing up in the stats up much more over Toronto, even though their projections seem the same and their ownership is going to be heavy on both sides. If you were picking one, that kind of leans you towards that side. So we'll go on to the next game. I don't have much more to add there, but let's talk about this next one. We talked about Hunter Brown, Twins, go for it. And then the Astros on the other side. Anything you're doing with them?
Yeah, Twins a full fade for me. I already said I'm lock button Hunter Brown. The only case I can make for the Twins is, hey, it's a double leverage situation. Hunter Brown's going to be 50, 60% owned, maybe even higher in some high stakes stuff for a good reason. I mean, this team has a 27% K rate against right-handed pitching on the road. Joey Gallo, sure, you could play a guy like Joey Gallo, Ryan Jeffers, Max Kepler. But overall, not scared of this lineup one bit. Even Joey Gallo, I mean, he does have power, but he's still striking out at a 37 or 36% clip. So overall, not going to the Twins on this slate. I'm lock button Hunter Brown. On the flip side, the Astros, I already talked about Louis Varland. I mean, he's allowing a 13% barrel rate. So, I mean, that sounds pretty good to me on the Astros side. They have some bats in here. Yordan Alvarez, obviously, Kyle Tucker. Chas McCormick is finally in the lineup here. Jake Myers. So I think the bottom of this lineup is a little sneaky here. Kyle Tucker, McCormick, and Jake Myers. Not a lot of people are going to go to those guys. Jake Myers, 2,500. McCormick, 3,500. Kyle Tucker is expensive, but the dude can take anyone deep. So I do think these Astros make some sense. And I'm looking at ownership, and I'm seeing them way down the board in terms of stacks, like even behind Cincinnati in terms of total ownership. So I might need to look at the Astros a little bit more because I don't believe in Varland here. And I think they can get to this Twins Varland and the Twins bullpen here. And you talked about it yesterday, right? If everyone's pushing their chips in on Hunter Brown, right? Well, why not the Astros too, right? Why not bring the Astros bats with them?
Yeah, I agree. And that's another way to do it, right? If you're saying he's going to get there, that's fine. But how can you you talk about double leveraging by not only not playing it, but some people playing the Twins. It looks foolish, even on paper. I understand why people do it, but they're down the board of anything that you look at across the industry. It's not like there's any positives that we can really spin on that besides you're going against a high-owned pitcher. But it kind of, you can do it the other way. We're all going to play Hunter Brown, but how many are going to play it with the bats that also give them the run support? I think that's the way you could do it differently. Even if it is a little three-man down at the bottom, there's a lot of ways that you could set it up. I think most, even if they were doing it, are going to get to those guys up top and the lefties that make sense. But there is good guys. You mentioned McCormick, Myers. If you want, people have been trying to make Abreu work for quite some time. Tucker as the one guy into your lineup as opposed to being the bottom of the stack. Use Tucker as your first one. Go Tucker, McCormick, Myers, something like that. Definitely think that's a little bit interesting as well to go with your pitcher to back him up. 2 games to go here, Nades. Let's move to this next one. We've got the Rockies and Diamondbacks, and people wanted to talk about this one. So give me your thoughts here on this one.
Yeah, this game's kind of interesting. I'm seeing Arizona pretty chalky, probably the third highest owned stack on the night. Obviously, we know what Lamet is. Nothing special. He's not going to go. He might go 3 or 4 innings, and then it's the Rockies' pen, which isn't great behind him. But again, I don't like attacking bullpen games too much. I'm kind of shocked that this total is as high as it is. Right, like 4.5, 4.6 implied run total for the Rockies. I mean, that's a pretty hefty total when you got a team striking out at 30% clip. 37% clip, right? It's hard to score runs when you get a guy on base and the next 3 guys strike out. So I think that run total there is also gonna. I don't know if I believe the 10 to 12% ownership on Tommy Henry, to be honest. Not that it matters at that ownership, but I mean the Rockies do have a pretty healthy implied team total, at least according to Vegas. So I can't do it. I know a guy talked about the Rockies are the Rockies the craziest thing on this slate. I think they are pretty crazy, to be honest. I trust the numbers. I mean, expected ISO of 0.086 on the year, expected WOBA 231, K rate of 37%. I can't sign up or at least put my money behind a team like that. If they beat me, they beat me. On the flip side, the D-backs, sure, you could go to the D-backs. Just know they're going to have ownership. But, I mean, Pavin Smith, if he bats leadoff again, 3,100, has power. Sure, you can go to him. Ketel Marte should be back in the lineup tonight, batting second or third. Have interest in him. Corbin Carroll's making a case for Rookie of the Year. He makes a lot of sense. He is 5,200, which I don't love. Lourdes Gurriel, I always love him. Christian Walker, I think you can play these guys. Jake McCarthy feels like he steals bases every time he's on, gets on. So sure, you can play him at 3K, but overall, I'm not super thrilled at these D-backs. They do have a healthy implied run total, but from a numbers perspective, expected ISO of 116. It's tough to score a lot of points when you're not hitting bombs and not putting the ball in play a ton. So I don't have a ton of interest there overall. But this game is kind of a wild card to me because Vegas tends to think it's going to pop a little bit, and the numbers don't really back it up.
Yeah, and this is what you said about projections earlier. Again, obviously the Rockies on some sites and some places are going to show up because they have to put some sort of projection that fits with the run total. But then you go and look into, like you said, the advanced data and the stats. It shows that they actually look pretty horrible on paper, and that's why the whole Tommy Henry conversation comes up. Well, again, you know what you're doing with Tommy Henry. You're taking on a huge risk. There's definitely something that can go on here. But I think if you think the total looks wrong, again, you want to get action in this, I would go to your sports book and bet the over. I'm not saying because you thought it was wrong, you should bet the under. I'm saying if you got a feeling this Rocky stack pops off, I think it reminds me of anyone who plays NFL DFS. I've said this for years. Try stacking up the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, they're putting up 30 points, but you got to go between every single dude they got on that roster with Mahomes. So you have to almost put all your lineups towards trying to find out the right combination. We only have the projected lineup, I think, as of now, Nades, but I mean, Profar, Grechuk, Diaz, Bryant, McMahon, Doyle, Tovar, Treasure. You're going to be trying to figure it out. I would say you'd have to put a lot of action in on trying to figure out the right combination there. So if you think it's fishy and that means they go over and Tommy Henry just gets crushed, I'd be looking to bet the over in the team total for the Rockies. That's just how I would look at it. I think there is moderate interest in the other side. It's like you said, it's another one that's a little bit tough to predict, but these guys actually pop quite a bit in our stack rankings. And while the advanced metrics don't give them the best from some of the other teams we've seen, Nades, it's kind of the one that's tricky to get to, right? Their prices are all in the middle. They're all set there as far as like their X-ISO and stuff like that, MOBAs or stuff are all middle of the range. It's hard to predict it, but at least in this case, you have a lot of lefty switch hitter type bats that you can pick through. We'll wait and see what that order looks like when it comes out with the starting lineup. But I definitely think I'd have more interest in the Diamondbacks side. Anything else there? If not, we can go to this final game, Yankees and Mariners, to round this thing out.
Yeah, no, I think we hit on it pretty good. I think this is a wild card game, truly a wild card game, the Rockies and D-backs. So personally, I'm probably just going to avoid it and just play the other spots. I'm pretty confident in the other spots we already talked about. So moving into this next game, I talked about Clark Schmidt. He's probably my favorite SP2 right now, the way I'm looking at it. His price tag, the matchup, everything kind of points to it. The little bit of leverage there off of Kirby in the exact same game, same matchup. So I'm not going to any of these Mariners here. The only guy I would look at is Julio Rodriguez. He's starting to hit the ball a little bit. We know what this guy is. Astronomical season last year. Went through a little slump. Pretty standard things, right? You come off a massive year as a young player. You go through a little sophomore hangover, and now he's starting to come back into form. So you can certainly go to him. He is expensive, but I do think he makes some sense. The rest of these Mariners, I'm fading. Again, I love Clark Schmidt here. On the Yankees side, pretty much only Aaron Judge for me, and I know that's a groundbreaking take, right? Like these guys are on here suggesting to play Aaron Judge, but I don't know what his ownership's going to look like. Obviously, he hit a bomb last night. The dude can just go long against anyone. 21% K rate on the year, 636 expected ISO, and they say, well, look at the sample size. That's in 57 at bats on the road this year. Obviously, Mariners, the Mariners Park isn't the greatest for hitting, but it's Aaron Judge. I don't think the dude could hit it out of anywhere. Put him in a parking lot and he'll hit it to the next parking lot down the street. So I do think he makes some sense, obviously, and he's a great one-off, right? I like to play Aaron Judge when he's not 40% owned, right? When everyone's going. If George Kirby's 30+% owned, Judge can't be high owned, especially at his price tag. So I do think he makes a very good one-off option here in this game. But overall, not stacking either side. Kirby, I do respect enough. I just don't think he has the upside at the price tag with the low K rate against these Yankees lineup, for me personally, to play him at that ownership. So overall, off this game for bats for the most part.
Yeah, the Judge one-off, you mentioned it. The pitchers both pop a little bit in our pitcher rankings. I do look at that. The stats aren't popping off the page in the advanced data metrics when you go look at that. The fact that you can get Judge as probably a little bit lower owned, at least because of the Kirby ownership, sure. But, it's kind of just one of those things where it may scare me off of one guy, but it doesn't mean I'm piling in on the other side. And it's funny, too, this is the one last thing I'll end on. I was going to say it's funny that we did the 13-game slate in an hour, and we do the 6 or 7 game slate in an hour as well. But we just spend more time at pitcher. But real quick, the Oh My Godfather again says, we roll in Clark Schmidt and Tommy Henry tonight. Then he says, all the bats. I'm definitely not playing those two together. I don't care what bats it gets you. That to me is like you pick and choose your spot and then pick and choose your other guy. For me, most cases, going to go to Brown. But just in general, any thoughts on that, Nades, before we get out of here? Anything else you want to add for this slate?
Yeah, I don't think it has the upside there because I do think, again, I'm pushing the chips in on Hunter Brown. I don't care about the ownership. I much rather eat ownership at the pitcher position. It's just much more projectable. There's analytical data that we look at. There's lineups, K rates, things like that. So I'm personally locking Hunter Brown. And I just don't think if you do that, right, yeah, you have all the bats, but what are all the bats? It's Boston and Toronto, right? So you do that, you have the same team everyone else does, right, that's doing something like that. So that's the only question. That's the only downfall I would say to that. Personally, I think there's a way to, number one, maybe not play the Blue Jays if you do that and go to one of these other teams like the Phillies or someone else that we talked about that could be unique if you do that. But overall, I don't have interest in that. I just think you're leaving too much upside there on the table at the pitcher position. Because is it crazy to think that, obviously I don't have a ton of interest in George Kirby, but is it crazy to think George Kirby at 9,400 goes out there and has a good game? I don't think it's out of the question, obviously, by any means. And he's expensive. Aaron Nola, I talked about Aaron Nola a little bit. Is it crazy to think Aaron Nola to go out there and deal at 9,100 and post a score? I don't think it's crazy. And if those guys do that, right, you're just drawing stone dead when you double pump pitcher like that. The double pump pitcher route is, I always like to anchor it around one pitcher that I feel pretty confident in a guy like Hunter Brown. The only time I really do that is if we have absolutely loaded slate like yesterday, right, in terms of bats. Obviously, the Braves didn't get there, but that's the only case I would really make for it. On this slate, especially at the ownership, if you do that, everyone's going to build the same team with the Blue Jays and the Red Sox. Yeah,
I agree, man. All right, let's get to Nade's Dong Call of the day. What do you got for this one?
Yeah, so we'll do the Dong Call in a second here. Typically, we give one pitcher to my pitcher, obviously outside of the chalk, right? Hunter Brown. I'm going to Clark Schmidt. I think Clark Schmidt can post a good score here. I'm not seeing a ton of ownership on him. Last game of the night flips the script on George Kirby. So I like Clark Schmidt quite a bit here in terms of a pitcher. And then my dawn call, let me pull it up here. I'll give you one, or I'll give you two here. I'll give you one. Rafael Devers, obviously I love the Red Sox. I think Devers, he's going to make the lineup again. He hasn't been in the lineup the last couple of nights. I think him right there in the 2-hole, I think he's going to go long against Weaver over Fenway. I love him. And then I'm going to go down the board a little bit here. And this is a risky one, but it's a guy I talked about, I brought up. Our second-ranked hitter over here, 2,500. Double leverage against Paxton's 20 to 25% ownership. It's going to be Luke Maile in the 9-hole for Cincinnati Reds. I think he takes Paxton deep tonight for sure.
All right. Well, I had a red lined up, so we got to, my take is this. I'm not going to mention pitcher. I think the reason this still went an hour, even with less games, was because we said Hunter Brown's name so many times. So I'm just sticking to that. I don't care the ownership. There'll be plenty of people tonight. There'll be good players that lock him or have him at 80% or whatever, even in their 150 set. So pick your stances somewhere else. That's what I'm doing. But I'm calling the double. Everyone's going Boston. I'm stacking it up the other side. Game stack, Cincinnati, Boston. You like the catcher? I'm talking about McLean at shortstop. It fills it out. There's not really something you're using on the Boston side that I care about too much. So that's going to be my down call. But my call is going to be the game stack, Cincy, Boston. Everyone's going to have Boston. Yeah, that will work out. But you're going to need the other side to go with it. You said it, same park, same everything. They're up our board a little bit. It makes sense. The other pitchers are down our board quite a bit, Paxton and Weaver. So there's ownership on Paxton a little bit at least. So I'm going to go with that game stack, fill it out with Hunter Brown and whoever fits. But that's all we got, Nades. Another good show, man, in the books. Everybody watching, again, if you forgot or got here late, this is the time. We mentioned it, starting the new channel, getting it off the ground. If you could just do us that favor at the end, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. The subscribe button will also get you notifications for when we keep going on with these free shows every single day. For Nades, for myself, ToeTagginTambo, let's ship it.